Hey everyone, welcome back to another devlog for my solo hobby game dev project Infernomon. My game is a dungeon crawler where each time you go and battle in a dungeon, the dungeon rooms will be slightly randomized. Before this month, my dungeon algorithm was very simple and it would create dungeon rooms about as random as finding a nerd in a card shop. But what I really want is for my rooms to feel more unique and more randomized and more like finding anyone besides a mom and a target. So my goal this month is to make it so the outside walls in my dungeon room are slightly randomized and go in different directions. And then I'll be making some slight updates to the lighting system as well as a little bit of the art in the dungeon. Also, I've added some links down in the description so you can find my artist who made the designs for the Infernomon in my game, as well as the person who composed the music that you're listening to in the background right now. So go ahead and check them out and leave them a like and a follow. Now I'll walk you through my dev timeline this past month. So if we look at my old dungeon generator, all it did was create one big room in the middle with 4 hallways in exactly the center of each side of the room. One of those hallways would be an entrance, one would be an exit, and the other 2 would be dead ends. This was very basic and needed to be spiced up a bit. Before just jumping in and updating the code, I wanted to lay out a plan for how I would generate the dungeons. So, like any adult that is too lazy to find a new and effective tool to accomplish a task, I decided to open up an Excel spreadsheet and start my planning there. So what you're seeing here is the plan I came up with. The squares in my spreadsheet would represent the tiles in my dungeon room. I then began highlighting tiles in the spreadsheet in different colors. The green tiles signify the possible locations for exits and entrances to spawn. Then I've highlighted orange tiles in the corner to remind me that these are areas that won't allow for new floor tiles or doorways to be placed, only wall tiles. Lastly, the white area in the middle only allows for floor tiles to be placed and nothing else. So let's walk through an example of how this might look. Let's say you're entering the first room in the dungeon and the algorithm first decides to place the entrance somewhere along the bottom. After that, it will randomly find an exit location, so let's say it sets the exit location to the top of the room. One thing my algorithm does is places some floor tiles down at the entrance and exit in this sort of U-shape, and I'll explain why I do that later on. After that, it will randomly start placing floor segments of a random length between 3 to 6 tiles long, starting along the side of the U-shape at the entrance of the map, and moving in a clockwise direction around the map. If my algorithm detects that the wall segment will go out of the map or into the white area of the map, it will shorten the wall segment to stay within the defined area. After the algorithm detects you've reached a corner, one of the blue areas, it'll turn 90 degrees clockwise and begin placing wall segments again. So it'll keep doing this until it reaches the exit. Once an exit is detected, it will stop placing floors, go to the other side of the exit, and start placing floors again. This is why the exit and the entrance is a U-shape, so that when the border floor connects to the U, there are no empty floor gaps between the hallway of the entrance and the outside of the map. This continues until the algorithm detects you're back at the entrance of the room. So now we have set the border floor tiles for the entire room. Next, my algorithm will find all the floor tiles that are within the recently placed border floor tiles and fills those in with more floor tiles. Next, it will surround all the border floor tiles with walls. So now that I have a plan, it was time to start programming. After the first few days, and by first few days, I mean first few hours, since this is just a hobby project I work on for like an hour a day, I was able to get the algorithm to generate the U-shape entrances and exits, as well as draw the random floor segments around the outsides of the map. So as you can see, this U-shape piece is where the entrance will be. Then if I walk around the map, here is where the exit will be. On the 4th day, I got the floor tiles to fill in the rest of the empty spaces within the border floor tiles, as well as fill in the bordering wall tiles. This went super fast because I could just reuse the wall placing function I'd written before in my first dungeon generator algorithm, but I noticed there was a problem within my algorithm. Sometimes it would create these areas where there's an empty space only 1 tile wide. You can see these bizarre looking wall tiles, which happens when my algorithm doesn't know how to handle these areas that are surrounded by floor tiles on all sides. To fix this problem, all I had to do was update my algorithm to check for 1 wide empty tiles after placing the floor segments, and then just fill them in with more floors. After that, I spent the next day getting the room transitions to work. So once you walk into this dark area at the exit of a room, you will go to the next room. The next day, I brought back in my features I made in my last devlog that would spawn the dungeon obstacles and enemy patrol packs, and I made a new function that would randomly place these torches around the outsides of the map. As a side note, I have some sad news. While playtesting at this stage, I found a new issue in my game where sometimes there is a bit of a lag spike that kicks in if I have a lot of enemies on the map that are all using my pathfinding algorithm at the same time. So sometime in the near future, I'll need to tweak my pathfinding algorithm to enhance it a little bit and clean that up. So then moving on to the next day, I wanted to bring back in the lighting system I had before and make a few updates to it. Sometimes my lighting system would make these weird pointy lines around the outsides of my dungeon obstacles. So after some failed attempts to get the shadows working on the obstacles, I ultimately decided I would just remove this logic completely and just draw simple shadows for each obstacle, just like I'm doing with my Infernomon. After that, I decided to update my torches to match the theme of my dungeon. I got these green torches from an asset pack I purchased last month, but I wanted to have the torches be more of a reddish color. So I opened up the torch sprites in paint.net, and I edited those torches to have a yellow center, a red outline, and an orange glow. After that, I loaded up the map and was pleased to see how the new torches looked with my updated lighting system. The next thing I wanted to do was add some styling to the texture of the floor tiles so that the floor wasn't just this one single flat color. So being someone like me that has a hard time just coming up with our ideas out of thin air, I decided to open up World of Warcraft and looking at the way walking paths were colored and began to rein in some inspiration. I noticed that starting from the center of the path and moving outwards, the tiles go from light to dark, so I decided I wanted to implement something like this in my game. The only problem was that my rooms are dynamic and random, so I wouldn't be able to just do the same kind of color wavy style that is in Warcraft Rumble, at least not very easily. But I could make a more simple version of this by making a new tile set. So I decided to open up paint.net again and get to work. I always get nervous when it comes to doing art because it takes me so long to do and my art skills are not great. So there's always the potential that I spend a bunch of time working on something that has very little payoff, but I was hopeful that this particular task was simple enough for me to attempt. I had to make 12 different tiles for each of the different orientations the floor tiles could be in, and these 4 tiles would be separated by a sort of squiggly line where the tile would fade into a lighter shade of brown. After I had 12 of those tiles done, I copy and pasted them and made 12 more tiles that were slightly lighter shade. This second set of tiles would fade into the original floor tiles. After I completed making the new floor tiles, I loaded them into GameMaker Studio 2 as sprites and began writing an algorithm that would set the sprites of the floor tiles based on their relative position to the walls and obstacles in the room. So the way my algorithm worked was, first, it would locate any floor tiles that were touching the wall or were touching the base of an obstacle, and then update their sprites with a solid floor tile that was a darker shade of brown than the original floor tile. Second, it would find any one with gaps in the floor tiles and fill those in with the same dark brown tile. Third, it would find all the floor tiles that were touching the first layer of floor tiles that I just placed down, then I'd update them to have the design where the one side of the tile is a darker shade of brown separated by a squiggly line and it goes into a lighter shade of brown. Then I would once again go around the room and fill in more one with gaps, the slightly lighter shade of brown. Last, I would go around the room and place down the tiles that have the slightly lighter shade of brown and half brown that is the color of the original floor tiles to create a nice transition back into the original floor tiles. This was a bit tricky and took a bit longer than expected, but I think it was worth it, and the floor it looks a lot better than it did before. So this is what my dungeon room looks like now. I think this new procedurally generated dungeon room is a bit better than my initially created dungeon generator that I created before. So those are all the updates I had this month. I still got some work to do as far as styling the dungeon goes and making things look a bit more pretty. I'll be updating the obstacles and updating the HUD and things like that. Thanks to all of you who stuck around until the end. If you haven't already, please like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next video.